the wrong gavel there.
Yeah, I don't want to reach for the wrong one. Thank you. All right. I'd like to call the meeting of the Bloomington City Council to order. If you would please stand for Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderman Freund.
Here.
Alderman Lauer.
Here.
Alderman Sage.
Here.
Alderman Miller-Lomway.
Here.
Alderman Stearns.
Here. Here.
Alderman Painter.
Here.
Alderman Schmidt.
Here.
Alderman Black.
Here.
Alderman Fazzini.
Here.
Mayor Renner.
Here. Now I have, here it is. I have a distinct honor here. I wonder if we could have former Alderwoman Jennifer McDade please come forward. And we have, where is, I have her, do we have her proclamation?
Is it not, it's not good?
No, that's for child abuse.
Proclamation.
Oh, we're just, okay, well, please, I want you to come forward. This is the thing that's really cool, though. And this is for Jennifer McDade, serving from May 1st, 2009 to February 6th, 2014, for her distinguished service and great camaraderie. Thank you very much, Jennifer. You gave up a lot, and we're very much appreciative. Thank you. Oh, okay. You'll probably have it on Facebook in a minute.
High five. I like it. You look good up here. I bet.
Very much. And may I just say a
Please.
quick thank you to all of the staff who taught me so much about what a great city this is to live in, and all of the residents here who were always so supportive and fun to work with. This was really an absolutely wonderful experience for me, and I'm truly grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. And if we could have another round of applause. Now we have an actual proclamation. Here we go. And this is proclaiming, proclamation declaring April as Child Abuse Prevention Month. Whereas the City of Bloomington believes that future prosperity depends on our youth, and whereas the City of Bloomington believes that nurturing relationships and stable environments improve the well-being of children, and whereas the City of Bloomington believes that the community should be a safe and comfortable place for children, parents, caregivers, families, and all others, and whereas preventing child abuse and neglect is a community problem that depends on involvement of people across the community to bring about solutions, and whereas the month of April has been designated as Child Abuse Prevention Month, and the Child Protection Network is providing much-needed services and solutions throughout McLean, Livingston, and DeWitt counties, and whereas all residents can participate in painting the town blue by displaying signs in their yards, by attending the First Friday event in downtown Bloomington on May 4th, by making purchases at Sugar Mama's Bakery, 405 North Main Street, during the month of April, and by shopping at Jack Lewis Jewelers, 1704 Eastland Drive in Bloomington on April 17th, to build awareness of this important cause. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Terry Renner, Mayor, do hereby proclaim the month of April 2014 Child Abuse Prevention Month in Bloomington, Illinois. I urge all citizens, community agencies, faith groups, education institutions, medical facilities, and businesses to increase their participation in efforts to support children, parents, caregivers, families, and all others, thereby preventing child abuse and strengthening our community. I wonder if I could have Bruce Bergathon, Rachel McFarland, please come forward. And if I have everyone who's involved in including Judy Brucker and others, please stand from the audience. And our distinguished State's Attorney, Jason Chambers. Thank you for coming. Bruce, if you could come on forward, and Rachel. Congratulations, and thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're great. Okay.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Take care.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Now we have a proclamation of water protection, source water protection to the Water Department. Mr. Cummings, thank you. We lost a lot of our audience there.
I have a way of doing that.
Don't take it personally, Craig.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity
Thanks.
to speak to you this evening. And I'm very pleased to introduce and ask him to come forward, Rick Twait of our water treatment facility, to accept this award. The City of Bloomington has been selected to receive the Source Water Protection Award for medium-sized water facilities from the Illinois section of the American Water Works Association, otherwise known as AWWA. This award is competitive. It's inaugural. This is the first year, and we're proud that the City of Bloomington has won it. It's really recognizing the city's collaborative efforts in source water protection and the many individuals, agencies, and foundations throughout the Midwest, and for that matter, the country, that have had a part in these watershed programs. Although the city has established numerous long-term relationships with government agencies, academia, and producers, farmers in our watersheds, this effort and the resultant award is attributable to this one man behind me, Rick Twait. Rick is very modest. He worked for years with Ron Schultz, who was in our water department, and I think Ron would say the very same thing. He is always very, very humble. He's quick to share the spotlight with others, and it's his tireless efforts in watershed protection and coalition building that have made the city's program a model for others to emulate.
I saw Ron nodding his head, and he doesn't impress easily.
No. I think anybody who has met Rick would say he is a tireless worker and a very humble individual. Now, the watershed program may not be widely known outside of McLean County or the state of Illinois, but this award will certainly help expand that recognition. The bar has been set quite high by Rick and his group with the city's Source Water Protection Award and his plan. Congratulations, Rick.
I can pass it around too.
No, if you want.
Yes, sir.
That's really cool, too. Yeah. Rick, you want to say a few words?
Sure. We're extremely proud to be a part of all this, and I really appreciate all the support and that the council and mayors over the years have given us, the trust that they've given us in this approach. This is truly a major part of our overall water supply planning and operations. It's a style that we have. It's our treatment philosophy. We're trying to improve the water quality and quantity and preserve the quantity as much as we can in the lakes themselves, as well as the catchments or the drainage areas that fill our reservoirs. It's somewhat of a, it's not a sure thing like building a treatment facility, at the water plant, but it's a longer term solution to it. It's in the long run could be hopefully as cheap as doing it the other way. And you have these other ancillary benefits. And the main thing is with some of these partners that we do have, of course, our long-term partner, our formal partner with the McLean County Soil Water Conservation District that we've had since 1992 in a formal way, and in the mid-'80s prior to that, We are also working with people like the Nature Conservancy and the Environmental Defense Fund and doing some work with some innovative ways of reducing the nitrates that are entering our reservoirs, doing some really fun, exciting stuff with our producers and some of this adaptive nutrient management, as well as some of the constructed treatment wetlands and other methods. And with the exciting projects that we have with our lakeshore stabilization and stream stabilization as well with the Illinois EPA and some other groups. So it's truly a collaborative effort. And one of the new things that we've had, new organizations, are the Friends of Everbloom. And they're adding another piece to this whole operation where we're trying to, besides just looking at the water quality in terms of our water supply, but we're also trying to increase the habitat and make these lakes more of the gems that they are now in terms of recreational use and having a wide variety of people enjoying them. But anyhow, I just wanted to thank you very much. Thank all of our partners here. And you'd be here till 10 o'clock if I were to name everyone, but just...
We won't be.
Huh? I was looking at that. I was waiting for the... I got 3 minutes. No. Anyhow, I just want to say thank you very much, and thank you again for your trust.
Thank you,
Your
Rick.
support. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving right along, we have an introduction
Mayor?
of... Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
When he was introduced, they said he was humble and tireless, but they didn't say anything about especially enthusiastic. I think we appreciate that.
That's great. Thank you. Moving on to the introduction of Frank Kaler, Interim PACE Director. City Manager.
Mayor, and we'll have Frank come forward. We just wanted to take a few minutes to have Frank just tell you a little bit more about his background. He's been with us just a short time now, but he's come on the heels of Mark Huber, who retired. Just want to make sure that any of these interim directors brought forward to kind of share with you a little of their background. And Frank has a unique experience with a number of communities here in Illinois. So if you take a few minutes, Frank, and just further introduce yourself.
Well, thank you, David. And I think I've met individually with all the council members and the mayor. My career originally started out in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, more years ago than I care to think about, but mostly it's been in the southwest suburbs of Chicago, Homewood, University Park, Romeoville, Riverdale. I was village administrator in Bourbonnais for 11 years, up in East Dundee for about 4 years. Became involved with GovTemps in 2010. Last 2 years I served as the interim community development director for the city of Lockport, and for about 6 months while I was there also the interim city manager as well during that period of time. So bachelor's degree in political science, master's in government urban studies, MBA in real estate finance, so just kind of a mixture of activities, but I enjoy local government and serving communities, and welcome any opportunity to meet with any of you for any issues that you may have in your wards or the city at large. So
Thank you. Welcome.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
And we move right along to our consent agenda. Are there any items that any member of the council would like to have removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Alderman Pizzini. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Fruin. Alderman Fruin?
Yes, Mayor. With both the consent and regular agendas items, I have not received any financial benefits from any of the parties, organizations, or individuals in these agenda items.
Thank you. If there is no discussion, we can do this by voice, or, well, we want to do it on, may as well do it on the screen. And it'll give me more practice.
Not that you need it.
It's not. Okay. No, maybe I didn't. Okay.
You ready?
I'm sorry. There we go. Okay. We are now. Aye or nay? Okay. All right. There we go. Yes, Madam Clerk, the motion carries 9-0. Okay. Now, moving right along, we have on our regular agenda, item 7A And actually, 7 capital A has several different components. It has to do with the $10 million street resurfacing bond contract. And so I guess I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to City Manager and possibly Mr. Karch.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'd like to have Jim Karch, Public Works Director, just take a few minutes to talk about these 3 contracts, and especially in as much as there is going to have to be some further negotiation with the low bidder, road construction. We just want the council and the public to understand that we're getting close, but we won't have the final set of streets to be resurfaced till after the negotiations on reducing the particular contract award. So we thought it'd be helpful just to have Mr. Karch explain that and anything else about these 3 contracts that are all tied into the $10 million street resurfacing bond. Mr. Karch.
Thank you, City Manager Hales. Mayor and City Council, back in the fall of 2013, you approved a $10 million bond. We talked about scheduling. We talked about the difficulties. We talked about the hoops that staff would have to jump through to make sure that we had a comprehensive plan brought to you. I'm thankful to say we met the deadline by being here tonight. We met the schedule talked about. In addition, we have all of the sewers televised under these streets. This is really that first time that we've been able to have those resources, been able to do the block by block, complete streets block by block philosophy. So this is a good turning point for the city with us. We're looking at, I'll be talking a little bit about the asphalt, the sidewalk and the like, but let's talk about the resurfacing contract for just a minute, if I could start with that. Whenever we started off with a very big list of streets, you remember, and I hope the memory serves you back to the fall where I said this won't be all the streets we resurface. And I said that many times because we tried to say we're going to look at a lot more streets than we can resurface so that we know there's going to be a lot of them that drop out because of sewer issues. And so tonight we're coming to you and we said we knew we only had this almost $8.2 million for the actual resurfacing, but we said let's go ahead and put out there for bid more than that. So that if the prices come in better, sometimes that economies of scale really will help us. And what we didn't want to happen is we would have underpromised, and then I like to underpromise, overdeliver, but in this case, we want to make sure we have enough streets out there that we've already done the homework on, we've already looked at. It's not as if they'll go away. We'll look at them for next year, the ones that we do have to drop off for a little bit. So what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be going to the contractor and start doing some value engineering. How can we compress what ones would be beneficial to maybe put off for 1 year? What would be best? Then we're ready for next year. But what we'll be asking for is just for you tonight to allow us up to a certain amount, and then we begin discussions with the contractor. Some streets already, I've heard from aldermen, I've heard from some citizens, hey, this was on there originally. We've had, like I said, we really identified some of those we've had to drop off for sewer issues. You allowed us some money for the sewer work. We actually, last year, we already did some sewer work. I don't know if you've had a chance to drive all the streets, but hopefully you'll see a few of those nice patches in the road that we actually were able to proactively, because of the sewer televising, fix some areas. And that's a great thing, because what would have happened is we would have overlaid, fixed the street. Boy, it caves in a year or two. There's nothing more frustrating than that. We've done everything we can do to look at the main line sewer. I've already said it's always good to give you the caveats. I can't guarantee the sewer services. Those are the difficulties. Those are the private sewer services. But the main lines, we've televised everything. Let me move on to the sidewalks. The sidewalk program is bigger than it normally is. Normally, we don't have that big of a sidewalk program, but I want to make sure you understand federally we're required, anytime we resurface a street, to make the ramps compliant with ADA. So it's going to be more than is normal because we're doing so much resurfacing. Every street that we resurface that goes through an intersection, we have to redo those ramps. So the positive aspect is we're redoing a lot of ramps. In addition, here's something you need to know. As part of this complete streets block by block philosophy, anywhere where we're doing resurfacing, we're going to look at the sidewalks that are rated 1, 2s, and 3s. Anything poor or less, we're also replacing those panels. That's a positive. That's a good thing. So again, the intent is once we're done, these streets will be in good shape, but also so will the sidewalks. And we're also going to be looking at the street signs. We'll be coordinating with the water department, make sure the hydrants are painted. Everything is in good shape. So this is one of those good coordinated efforts that you're seeing. The last thing I want to focus on is continuing the program of what we talked about with pavement preservation. On Saturday, only 2 days ago, we made this presentation to you talking about the state of our infrastructure. The only way there's a couple different ways we can catch up. One, throwing an inordinate amount of money and continuing to do what we did in the past. What we're trying to do is change, and we've already talked to you about this, change the way that we look at our pavements, stretch the life of them, stretch the value of what we're putting into those pavements by cheaper services, cheaper ways to put reclamite, CRF. It stretches the life, similar to an oil change on a car, so to speak. It allows that car to run longer. If you don't take care of it, it'll fall apart sooner. So tonight we're just wanting to bring this to you. This is a continuing program over the past few years. Hopefully you've continued to see improvement in value in the way that we do our streets. We're not there yet. I want to make sure I say that one more time. We're not to the tipping point yet at all. I wish we were. But we'll get there with your help. We have to stay the course with sustainable continued funding and a good steady plan. But tonight, this program put before you is part of that. And we appreciate your help as always and the support for the program.
Thank you. Now we have the analysis of bids and approval of the contract for the 2014 bond general resurfacing. And I will go ahead and turn that over to our city manager, Mr. Hales.
Mayor, as indicated, we are recommending that the unit prices from Rowe Construction for the 2014 Bond General Resurfacing Program be accepted and the contract be approved in the base amount of $8,190,000 to be paid from the fiscal year 2014 budget, with an additional $140,000 from the alternative fiscal year 2015 Howard Street CDBG project, and that as these specific streets are negotiated to account for these unit prices to $8,190,000 that the council authorized the mayor and city clerk to execute all necessary documents associated with this project.
Okay. Is there a discussion? Is there a motion to approve?
I'd make a motion we approve.
Moved by Alderman Fazzini. Is there a second? Second by Alderman Fruin. Discussion. Further discussion, questions? Alderwoman
I
Painter.
have a quick question. Is it unusual to just get one bid?
I'll have Mr. Karch explain that. It's unfortunately that's a fact of life here in Central Illinois.
Okay.
Not up in Chicago and other areas where you have more competition, but
Alderman Painter, that's a great question that has been asked in the past by previous council members and some current council members as well. With our asphalt plant, we do put that out for bid. There are other vendors who also can bid on this. Epple up north, McLean County, asphalt here locally. We do put that out for bid, but with a contract maybe this size, they didn't choose to bid on it. It was the best we were able to do. Some years we're able to actually acquire more bids. We have to be very sensitive with how you do some of that. But in this case, we just received the single bid.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Alderman Sage.
Just a quick comment. Jim just wanted to pass along, probably speaking for the council, thanks to Public Works and to engineering, because I think we all have some sense of the magnitude of the project and the time that was involved and how there was so much work done on this, but also having to keep the wheels on in a lot of other ways. So pass along our appreciation to your team, if you would, please.
Alderman Sage, I appreciate that, but I really want to make sure the council understands our staff worked very hard, and they have a deep appreciation for myself for the work they did. It was very hard.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Oh, Alderman Stearns and then Alderman Lauer.
I had a question for Jim, and I apologize if I'm missing something, probably am. One of the streets that's being addressed is Evans Street. Familiar with that one? Okay. And I was just wondering about the brick, because most of it is brick. So what is the plan there? I mean, I know we've had brick street policies proposed in various, but I'm just not sure how that's going to work on Evans.
Mm-hmm. With Evans in that block, with as you recall, we have on the internet a Brick Street strategic plan. We have the
Right.
different categories for that. Evans is one of those. We actually have heard from residents who've asked us. This has been one of those that's been requested to be resurfaced. It's not in good shape, as me understanding that I've received. And whenever I drive out there, this is one of those that, as I recall, there's a lot of the different utility patches. It's a very piecemeal Brick Street. There's some that are really
Okay.
pretty that you want to say. Again, if you ever get a chance to look at this, I would encourage you. There's those brick streets that are beautiful we want to preserve. If there's a patch, we want to come back in and fix the brick anytime we can. And then there are some that they're just not in good shape. They're not easily driven. The citizens actually would like to see them overlaid.
And some do. I mean, I totally agree with that. And I'm kind of coming late here to this, so I do apologize for that. But I'm wondering, so we're definitely going to resurface over the brick. Is that correct? I mean, we're just going to.
Yes. And it has been
And-
done in the past, and there are situations where we will in the future as well.
And again, my apologies, have we held any kind of public meeting with the residents about this complete resurface over the brick? I mean, not to my knowledge.
No, we have not.
Okay, I didn't think so, because I do want to be sure they understand, and frankly, I don't think they do.
Mm-hmm.
And I also wanted to ask that question about Taylor Street. What's planned for Taylor? I think that might be the reclamate.
That's just a reclamite
So
street. What probably will happen, and I could see happening because of the amount too of the overall resurfacing dollars that we have.
Right.
I could very easily see that Evans Street being one of those where we send out letters, because in the beginning probably weren't aware if we would or would not be able to select that one. So more than likely we'll send out letters if we get a lot of folks that want to meet. We just meet with it and do it next year. We want to make sure that with citizens, if there's a lot of concern, honestly, it's not something we want to go up against.
And I appreciate that. And what's the plan on Taylor?
Taylor with reclamite, that's, I don't believe that block, I'll have to check, because we wouldn't be reclamiting a block of brick.
Okay.
That probably is not a brick block. There's
Okay.
different blocks with
Right,
Taylor that
right,
are and are
right,
not.
Right.
So we're not going to be doing that. Yeah.
I think that's right. I think you're right about that. But I did want to clarify on Evans. Again, should have probably called you, but again, fell through the cracks. And I do want to be sure that those citizens are aware. And yes, if there's a lot of feedback, we can
Not
talk
an
to
issue
them.
at all, especially this year when we have more than we can do. It's even better.
All right. Thank you very much.
Alderman Lauer.
I just wanted to make a quick comment, and this is really more to the general public than it is to Jim. We're really putting it out there this year. This is a huge project, much bigger than we've experienced in many, many years, I'm sure. And please be patient with us. We're going to have a lot of folks that are delayed, a lot of folks that are rerouted maybe, and it's a big job. And everybody's going to have a little piece of that, and the general public's going to be just right along and be very careful of our workers, because we're exposing them in a very, very big way, more than we have in many, many years. And try to be patient with what we're trying to do here, because we're really trying to make an improvement. So thanks, Jim.
Alderman Malomboy.
Thank you, Jim. Great job. I think that's a lot of work that you guys will be doing. We'll be busy this summer. Could you tell us what process you'll follow? And I think I know I understand it, but I think it's important for the public to know as well that you have a rational process that you follow in terms of determining which streets you're going to drop off the list.
That's an excellent question. The difficulty we have every year, this is actually something about every year we talk about with resurfacing with our council. In the past, we've actually put some of this documentation on our internet, and I'll encourage all of the citizens out there to check out our website, because we actually have some criteria by which we select streets. The difficulty for us, to be honest, is just that you have so many that are in need. And, it's so easy to hold up one or another. And every one of the streets we have selected is needed. And so what we'll try to do is, as much as trying to figure out which ones to drop off, are going to be which ones are the most economic for us to get done. So we can try to stretch and get the biggest bang for our buck. So a lot of that is going to be coordinating. Some of that will be lumping some areas together. Some of that will be what are maybe the longer stretches so we can try to increase and lessen mobility because anytime you have the mobilization costs, you increase that. What about your traffic control, any of those type of areas? Those are the things we're going to consider. But then also we want to make sure that there's still a reasonable spread of arterial roads and some of the residential streets. We've said before that we really want to make sure we get a lot of those the arterial roads done. Those are the ones that have the high volume. Those are the ones that, 5, 10,000 vehicles every day they travel that road. And those are the ones we hear about consistently. But it's difficult because you have to balance that with, even if it's 100 people on a road, you don't want to ignore those folks either because they've maybe been waiting for 20, 25, 30 years for a resurfacing project.
Okay. Other questions? Okay. I think it's about time then for us to go ahead and vote. Okay. There we go. Motion carries 9-0. Thank you. Moving on to the next item is analysis of bids and approval of contract for 2014 bond sidewalk replacement and handicap ramp program. And we have 5 minutes budgeted for that. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Alderman Fazzini. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Black. Mr. City Manager, David Hales, you have anything to add to this?
Nothing else has already been expressed unless there's any questions council had for the city staff.
Any questions? Okay. Let's go ahead and vote. That passes 9-0. Thank you. Moving right along to item 7A-D, small d, analysis of proposal and approval of contract for the 2014 bond pavement preservation. Is there a motion and second before we ask for comments?
So moved.
Moved by Alderwoman Painter. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderwoman Schmidt. Any further discussion? I actually want to not share that. All right. We'll go ahead and vote. There is no questions. Scott? Okay. All right. Motion passes 9-0. Thank you very much. We move on to the Luther Oaks expansion project, and we have a brief presentation before we go further.
Mayor, I'd like to have Jim Karch, Public Works Director, just make a few comments. Typically, you would find this type project on the consent. However, there's a number of actions being taken, things being approved, things being rescinded. But two, we do have a very significant condition incorporated in the special use permit having to do with a secondary road. And I'd like to have Jim just kind of mention a little bit about this. You did hear Saturday about some high-risk type developments. And the skilled nursing facility is one of those high-risk developments, but we believe that the applicant has worked with city staff on a very important condition. Jim, if you would kind of mention that condition and why we tried to incorporate that in this project.
Thank you, City Manager Hales. Mayor and City Council, with this project, one of the things that I recall back in early 2000, I got to be the resident engineer out on a project, Veterans in Hamilton Road, whenever we did that project, and Trinity Lutheran purchased some property. They were really looking for a school, and I don't know if all of you caught that article, but it's a good thing to celebrate and acknowledge that their school is doing very well. Recently in the Panagraph, they had an article talking about the expansion of that school and how well Principal Sean is doing in that area, and so that's a good thing to celebrate. One of the things they had as part of their larger plan was to work with Luther Oaks to expand that and kind of partner with that. So they leased some of their ground just south of Hamilton Road, just east of Veterans Parkway, to Luther Oaks. And we got to see that as I was building that project. I remember driving. As a very nice facility. Always have heard good things about their food. I still am waiting for an invitation at that point because I like food. And at that point, then they've really done well. They've continued to expand it. We've always been a good partner. And one of the things that we've looked at, we've heard a lot from Luther Oaks residents on the council about Lutz Road and the need for Lutz Road. whenever they looked to expand that skilled nursing unit, they went, and we know we've seen this before. They came, they were looking at something larger. The state of Illinois wasn't able to approve that. They shrunk it down. They're back to us again. There were a couple concerns that staff expressed as we kept working with them, and I'm thankful to tell you that we were able to work that out and come to an understanding. I'd like to talk to you about those two things. First, our own Public Works Department, they were having some issues with the lift station out there. There is actually a gravity lift station that takes the sewage, not a fun topic, but nonetheless reality, the sewage from Luther Oaks, and we were having some different issues with the material coming from Luther Oaks. It was catching in our lift stations, causing call-outs, causing issues, and so we worked with them. We actually put in a screen. We wanted to make sure that screen was on out of this part of this special use permit. We were thankful they were in agreement to put that on the private sewer line, and then also they're putting in a grinder pump for extra insurance on their part. So we're thankful for that partnership. The next facet to talk to you about, though, is the secondary access. One of the things that we've talked about in Public Works a lot is how do you get to that facility? Both not just for the residents, but also for our fire department. Fire Chief Kimberling always looked at that with, wanting to make sure whenever you add that skilled nursing unit, that is a very high intense need for our fire chief and also with any of the needs, the service needs to that area. One of the other facets, though, is that with a secondary access for residents, that also could maybe change the way that the residents come into the facility. Maybe instead of going along Lutz Road and having to improve Lutz Road, maybe they would come down Heideloff and around on Greenwood and have a different access. It might be a shorter way for Bloomington to have to improve and increase our road to accommodate those residents. So we really were wanting to find a compromise, and we're thankful that through this dialogue with Luther Oaks, we're able to maintain that great partnership and ask for your approval tonight for this good project, because what they did is they're allowing that secondary access off Greenwood, and my thanks to Trinity Lutheran, they allowed that additional access because it's their property, and that was one of the difficulties for Luther Oaks. It's their property that there's a construction entrance that will be maintained for emergency access, so the fire department can cut the lock if they need to, get in through that area and service Luther Oaks, especially the skilled unit, the additional skilled unit. So with that, hopefully that's the description of those two criteria for the special use permit.
Questions of Mr. Karch? Okay. We did have a motion. Madam Clerk, I didn't ask for the motion. Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. That was the presentation. We need the motion to approve the Luther Oaks first edition special use.
Move as presented.
Moved by Alderman Sage.
Second.
Second by Alderman Lauer. Discussion? Okay. Let's go ahead and vote. Oh, okay. Sorry. Motion carries 9-0. Thank you. And we move on to the next item as part of this. The petitions from Luther Oaks, Inc. to rescind the final plat for first edition to Luther Oaks subdivision, which was approved by the council on August 12, 2013, and approval of the final plat for first edition to Luther Oaks subdivision. Is there a motion to approve?
Move acceptance as presented.
Moved by Alderman Sage. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Lauer. Any further discussion, questions? Okay. Should be good to vote. Alderman Lauer? Oh. Okay. Motion carries 9-0. Okay. Moving right along. We have the petitions from... Did I do that? Yes, sorry. Petitions from Luther Oaks, Inc. for the vacation of a sanitary sewer easement and a water main utility easement located in Lot 1, Luther Oaks subdivision. Is there a motion to approve?
Move acceptance as presented.
Moved by Alderman Sage. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Lauer. Any further discussion? Motion carried 9-0.
Mayor, could I make just a brief comment?
Absolutely.
About this, and I will be brief. I want to highlight again the collaboration, the cooperation between Trinity Lutheran Church, Trinity Lutheran School, Luther Oaks, and the City of Bloomington. And I know that partnership has always been a positive, professional, and cooperative one, and so that's much appreciated here. Just to highlight a couple of other points, the skilled nursing care or the skilled nursing facility will add about 30 full-time jobs out there. I share that just simply for background and awareness. And again, just to highlight that sooner or later we're going to have to deal with the Lutz Road issue. I know next month we're going to do another traffic study, and we'll finish up work on the design for Lutz Road, and those are some important steps. Now, our budget this year obviously is not going to allow us to do anything this year, but just share that with you to say, hey, we have good, positive, professional partners here, and they've waited patiently, and we're making some concrete steps forward. So again, just for general awareness, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Alderman Lauer.
Just wanted to support David in those comments and just add that, this has been a very, very long process in that neighborhood. I think all of the above that are involved here have it's a real bright spot in Bloomington Normal, especially on the southwest side. And it adjoins my neighborhood, and it's one of the few major projects in that area in many, many years. So we're very proud of what they all are doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving right along to item C, tax enforcement. We start with a presentation by Jeff Juergens, our City Corporate Counsel. Mr. Juergens, come forward, please.
Director Karch does such a great job of these presentations. I asked him if he wanted to present on the tax issues, but he's not that stupid, and he left. But I'm here just to present on a couple of tax issues. There are two items before you tonight. One is an ordinance updating and amending the penalty provisions of our tax code, not enacting any new taxes or anything like that, simply to update our tax code. We found some inconsistencies, some issues where the tax provisions were a little outdated. So we updated those. It's clearer now for staff on how to proceed on arrearages, on interest that's to be charged, on penalties to be charged. So those provisions have been updated in the tax code. We also have a repayment agreement in front of the City Council tonight. Quickly after I started with the city in January, one of the first issues that was brought to my attention was a tax arrearage with the Chateau. That's the agreement that's before you tonight. And we have been working diligently since that issue was brought up to try and get that resolved. Tonight we are before you with a comprehensive agreement that is going to allow for the repayment of everything that is back due from the Chateau, as well as $56,000 in interest, $12,000 in penalties, for a total repayment of $288,263. There will also be interest charged on this. It'll be repaid over 3 years. And so in addition to the total amount due right now of $288,000, there will be another basically $77,000 paid in interest. So the city will be made whole by this. It's the kind of thing that going forward, we want everybody, all the businesses in the community to know this is something we take seriously. We have improved our procedures so there's greater communication between the Department of Finance and the legal department, so that we've now got this process for filing tax liens. We've got this process for making sure people are notified, and we make sure that this is really not an affordable option for anybody to not pay their city taxes when they're due. With that, I will answer any questions.
I just wanted to add for the council's perspective, I was made aware of this just a few days after actually I was sworn in as mayor, and we began to work on this. We met with the people of the Chateau, and on the Liquor Commission, the thing that ultimately we had was before we gave them a liquor license at Tony Roma's, we wanted to make sure that we're on the path to an agreement. And so I realized they had tough times, but a lot of businesses have had tough times, and it can't be at Bloomington taxpayers' expense. And so I think we're going to be made whole. And thank you for your work, and Mr. Boyle for his work on this, and the city manager. We managed to make substantial progress. Anyway, questions of Mr. Juergens or comments? Alderman Fazzini.
Yeah, I noticed the answers to my question concerning this said that there's going to be greater communication between departments, which is what we want, and that the arrearages that last in excess of 60 days will be forwarded to legal,
which is good. And it clearly allows the city to file tax liens on arrearages and take other enforcement actions. I guess the question, Jeff, is what other enforcement actions once you put a tax lien on?
Well, there are a couple of different options. One option is always to take somebody that's in default to court and try and collect on it that way. The provisions in the ordinance basically track the provisions in the state code, the Department of similar things that the Department of Revenue allows. And so if a lien is actually filed, we could go to enforce that lien and actually seek closure of a business.
Yes.
So hopefully it would never come to that. In that type of situation, really nobody wins. But at the same time, you can't let this get so out of control that you're in a situation where you're, hundreds of thousands of dollars behind in your taxes. So I think that really kind of the internal protocols where we're keeping better track on these types of situations. And this does happen. It's not unusual, within the city of Bloomington. Other cities have faced this problem. Other businesses have faced this problem. But I think as a city, we want to make sure that we're on top of this. And we want to make sure that the businesses know that we are keeping track and we are going to enforce our tax codes and we are going to make sure that the businesses pay the taxes. So,
Does the tax lien allow us to acquire the property typically?
that is an excellent question, and I would have to refer to one of my tax experts for that. I know that it would allow us to basically go out and close the doors of the business. And it very well may allow to acquire the property if it's to help pay for the lien, to foreclose on it.
Last question. This one got up to $288,000. I don't think we were aware of that. At what point does the city council become aware of a problem, not when it goes past 60 days when it gets referred to legal, but at some point, I'd like to be able to know that we have a problem and it's this dollar amount and it's this far behind, so that we can weigh in and say what we think. Whether you want to follow it or not is something else. But is there a mechanism for letting us know?
Let me answer that, because this particular issue was brought to my attention by Patty Lynn Silver when she was named finance director. And I think it's due to the leadership of Patty, due to the changeover, and she has brought on some excellent employees that have got on top of these things. So certainly, I think going forward, one, I need to make sure as city manager it's brought to my attention so I can bring it to your attention. Unfortunately, this is one that wasn't brought to my attention, early on in the process. We also have a debt collection policy and procedure that is yet to be prepared. That will kind of put in concrete some of these things, because I think all of us realize, that the first 30, 60, 90 days is critical. We want to make sure that as each department who is tracking some of this outstanding debt, once it gets to these critical points, that the procedures have it, that they kick that not, to legal. It's brought to my attention so that as necessary, we can bring it to your attention as well. So,
And just as mayor, if there weren't some other delicate issues with respect to the chateau, and frankly, they're acquiring Tony Roma, there were some delicate months there that we were in negotiations and discussions. I would have talked to you all about this if it were happening. Now we're on track, and just to be clear, this isn't like when somebody doesn't pay their property taxes, right? They're getting the money, and they're not giving it to us, and they're collecting it, right? Not just the chateau, but other places. When they're behind in this is a particularly difficult situation. Alderman Lauer.
Just to reiterate, Mayor Renner, thank you very much. And I'm glad we do have a vehicle that we're at least talking about. And I would emphasize that the will here is the city keep the business in business, to do business.
Right. Absolutely. Good point.
And if there is no other way, then at some point, then maybe we could look at foreclosure or whatever we have to do. But the will is certainly to keep folks here in town doing business. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And with this specific case, my conversation with the owners of the chateau all along have been, we want you to succeed. The city of Bloomington wants you to succeed. This agreement that we've got before you tonight, they feel like this is something that's going to allow them to succeed. They want to get this repaid. I think that this is going to be a good agreement all the way around that's going to get this wrapped up within 3 years. So,
thank you. Alderwoman
Yeah,
Stearns.
thanks. Thank you. A couple of things. First of all, in terms of the Chateau, I'm sure they're not the only institution, business that has fallen into this with the various hard times and what that we've had. Can you give us an idea of the scope of this across the city? Roughly, maybe any idea how many other
I don't think
businesses
there's anything like
or?
this. This was the,
Okay, that's
this
fine.
is the
I'm
outlier,
just
but any, Mr. City Manager?
All others are very current. Now, we have had a couple of, let's say, I'm trying to think of, as we get into some hotel, motel, we've had a couple of bankruptcies.
right.
And those have taken place where the amounts
Right.
have not been that significant. And again, unfortunately, that's one of the things we face. When they start getting behind,
Right.
they're also probably in financial
Right.
distress. And sometimes bankruptcy occurs much
Well,
sooner
if I could
rather
just
than
finish
later.
my question.
But I'm not aware of any others that,
If I could just finish.
so-
Can I finish?
Of course.
Thank you. My question for you, Jeff, is roughly how many other businesses do we have that might be in an arrearage situation? Roughly a number, if you have it.
I do not have that, and I don't know that there's anybody here from finance tonight.
That was my answer. I have the information. There is no others, other
there's
than
no-
a couple
there's no
that
others?
has been in
Okay.
bankruptcy, so.
And obviously, the next part of my concern, question, comment is that clearly if a bankruptcy is filed, our collection procedures and all that totally stop, clearly.
Well,
That will-
it depends. Sometimes there's higher priority in a tax lien, and I have to
Okay.
plead. I have utilized an attorney in our office in Springfield who was a senior assistant to the Attorney General's office on revenue and litigation. He actually represented the Department of Revenue. He helped draft some of these provisions in our ordinance. He was kind of in charge of collections. So I have relied heavily on him, and that's a question that the city manager has asked me to, and I just haven't gotten back to him on that. But that is certainly something we're looking at to make sure if there is ever a bankruptcy, that we will have the most rights that we can have under a scenario like this.
Right, and the property tax lien would take precedence, and then maybe
The tax, yeah.
it would be a very interesting question, and I would be curious because, frankly, as Alderman Lauer was expressing, if a business is approaching any kind of bankruptcy, clearly it's very much to our advantage to work with them.
Yes.
And passing this legislation or ordinance tonight doesn't in any way, interfere with our ability to work with that business.
Oh, absolutely not. No,
Okay.
I think that we will develop internal protocols,
Okay.
in terms of the liens, when we file things, when we're, how aggressive we attack. And it kind of goes back to Alderman Lauer. Obviously we want businesses within the city to be successful,
Right.
but on the same time, you can't let an arrearage, grow so much that it's basically a cheap loan for a business.
Right.
There
And
is nothing cheap about, the agreement we've reached with the Chateau. It is certainly certainly an expensive proposition for them.
Well, that's a business that I think has had a lot of, difficulties, and I certainly wouldn't want to see another such situations as we've had out there occur again, because it's a very significant and visible and
Yes.
important business for the city, I think. Thank you very much.
Okay. I'm going to turn to Alderman Fazzini, reminding everybody we're really way past our time. But obviously this is important. I'm just noting that. Alderman Fazzini.
Okay. Let me just share a little bit of experience before joining the council. One of the hotels that was having a similar problem, and Mayor, you're correct. What's happening is they're getting the money. It's not like property tax. They're getting money every month, and they're spending our money. Okay. 60 days of that for this hotel was either you stop doing that or we're going to close the doors. And they had one day. Okay. They managed to scramble twice to bring the money in. So the longer you let them go, regardless of where you are in the priority, whether your tax lien's ahead of a property lien or it's ahead of any other liens, what you're doing is giving away your money in bankruptcy by not acting quickly. So no, we don't want to close them. But on the other hand, when they're using our money to stay open, that's not a good situation because that's money that's going to all the other creditors, frankly. So we do need to act more quickly in the future. This one worked out really well. I'm delighted how it worked out. Had we acted more aggressively, we might not have gotten all of the money, and they might have ended up closing. But I think we were just lucky.
Thank you. All right. We move on to I'll ask Mr. Juergens to stick around here as we move forward in case we have questions. We have the text amendment to Chapter 39 addressing the enforcement and collection of city taxes. Is there a motion to approve as presented?
So moved.
Moved by Alderman Fazzini, second by Alderwoman Schmidt. Any questions, comments? Okay, I'm going to start the vote. Okay, motion carries 9-0. And we're going to move on to the Chateau tax repayment agreement. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Alderman Milawambwe.
Second.
Second by Alderwoman Stearns. Any comments, questions? I'm going to go ahead and start that vote too. Motion carries 9-0. Thank you. And we move on. We've got a total of 10 minutes budgeted for the presentation of the Market Fairness Act of 2013 by Justine Robinson. And then we have a Market Fairness Act of 2013 resolution. And Justine, you want to come forward?
As she does, this is certainly an issue that came up during our recent EDC One Voice trip. Justine will talk about this and some of the information we heard from our federal congressional representatives on this very topic. Justine.
Thank you, City Manager Hales, and good evening, Mayor, City Council. Thank you for the opportunity to come before you this evening and provide you with an update on a critical piece of legislation that is pending and working its way through Congress as we speak. The Marketplace Fairness Sales Tax Act is indeed a piece of legislation that would serve to level the playing field for brick and mortar retail establishments as compared to online retail generators such as Amazon or others. It essentially is not a new tax that's being created. It is merely an adjustment in the way that the tax is being collected. Currently, individuals are supposed to be claiming this tax on their income tax statements around this time of the year every year, and this piece of legislation would alter that so that it would be a point of sale collection as it is for traditional bricks and mortar retailers. The International Council of Shopping Centers has been advocating for this piece of legislation over the last several years, and tonight we're bringing before you a resolution so that the Bloomington City Council can show its support for this piece of legislation, encourage our elected officials. I know Senator Durbin and Kirk are in support, and we were able to speak with them, as City Manager Hales alluded to, when we were in Washington, D.C. Durbin actually co-sponsored the piece of legislation, and Senator Kirk voted in the affirmative, as was noted in your council packet. So we are hoping tonight that you can approve this resolution, indicating your support, and help us to reach out to other officials who might be voting on this piece of legislation as a means to improve the economic viability of our local bricks and mortar retailers, but also improve the economic viability of our city as a means to ensure the collection of sales taxes in a more accurate and favorable manner.
Just to clarify, it's also the case that the U.S. Conference of Mayors has endorsed this, and I believe the National League of Cities and the National Association of Counties. So local governments, I'm assuming the state governments are on board with it as well. But questions, comments, starting with Alderwoman Stearns. We technically only have 5 minutes for this, but we can have a little leeway. Alderwoman Stearns.
Sorry, I had my button pushed by mistake. Sorry, I actually don't
Anybody, any comments? Okay, can we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Alderman Fazzini, second by Alderman Black. Further discussion?
I just a little confused on how they propose to enforce all this. I mean, not that I don't support it. It's just that
Sure, and I believe that they're currently working, which is why it's been postponed in Congress, to iron out those details. Certainly, point of sale is a little more difficult when you're working with online retailers, but in this day and age of electronic communications, it is possible to pinpoint where those sales are being generated from and track and pass those on. So I know it is a point of information that's been studied, and the retailers, both locally on the state level and national level, are all in support of making sure that it's a cooperative effort to see this through.
I just might add, currently, internet retailers don't necessarily add a sales tax on the purchase price. So part of it would be the internet retailers would have to charge not only the price of the goods, but the sales tax, and then remit the sales tax to Illinois state government, which in turn would distribute it, as is currently the case with bricks and mortar. So that's how they would do it.
There are apparently some online places that already do this, and states that have already legislation that have pioneered this. But okay, we are out of time. But I'm going to so let's be quick. Alderman Black, and then
I'll be
Fazzini.
quick. To Alderman Lauer's point, this morning I actually bought something online, and it took my billing zip code and then was able to do an estimated tax, which I look forward to reporting on next year's taxes.
An honest millennial. Alderman Fazzini.
Sorry.
Okay. All right. Wonder if we can go ahead and vote then on this. Thank you, Justine. Motion carries 9-0. Thank you. Okay. And we move right along to our presentation by Mr. Kimmerling, our Fire Chief of 2013 Annual Fire Statistics and Fire Services. Come forward. Thank you, Chief.
Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. We've already covered a little bit of this presentation during our budget session that we had the other day, but so I will try. I know that we had 60 minutes allotted, so I am going to try to be brief on the portions that you may already be aware of and move to the meat of the presentation.
We actually have 30 minutes.
30 minutes.
30.
It was 60 to start with, right?
Right.
So we've
A budget cut.
we've abbreviated it. And in the essence of time, I want to make sure I get to the opportunity for all of you to have questions if you have any. So first of all, just an overview. You know, we have 5 operating fire stations in the city of Bloomington, for those who don't know, and their locations are on the map that you have in your handout. We have headquarters at 310 North Lee, Station 2 at 1911 East Hamilton Road, Station 4 at 1705 South Morris Avenue, Station 6, 4040 East Oakland Avenue. Again, as we talked about before, firefighters in the city of Bloomington work 24-48 shifts, basically 3 shifts, and with the amount of time that they spend anymore, we are actually having a lot of guys that are working a lot of overtime. A lot of these guys are working 48-24s, which, again, we talked about in our budget meeting, that with the age of our employees, that this is definitely something that we need to consider on the workload of our fire department. Frontline apparatus, 2 truck companies, 4 engine companies, 18 personnel assigned daily to fire apparatus, 18. Again, I'll remind you again of the conversation we had on the risk assessment for the different types of vehicles and buildings, or the buildings we have in our community. So that's our daily staffing. 4 ambulances, 2 guys per ambulance, 1 EMS supervisor's vehicle, 1 shift commander for a total, and then we have our aircraft fire response for the airport. 1 person dedicated to that. 29 personnel daily serve the city of Bloomington in these seats every day. We have a hazardous materials response unit that is not staffed with extra personnel. That's an add-on for what we do. It's a regional team. It's in cooperation with Normal, who has a TRT team. This is our half of what we do, and it does have quite a bit of response. We actually have been out in the county, spent some time in Normal helping them out, and is used in our own community. Just kind of an overview. This is a little bit closer view from what we looked at in our budget hearing. This is just the last 5 years. Again, you can still see that our trend for call volume has continued to increase, basically up over 10,000 calls for the last couple of years. And I'll just remind you, in 2008, we had already broke 10,000 calls again. So we're a very busy department. The individuals that are out there providing the service are definitely busy. 10,045 calls. What that means is over 15,000 vehicle trips out of our buildings. And if you count the number of times that the personnel, if I count the number of personnel calls that is for each guy to go out the door, over 32,000 calls that our personnel are servicing for our community every year based on this number. EMS calls, total responses for EMS, 8,000 calls, contact with over 13,000 people, transported about 6,100, and you can see what most of our top 5 EMS response types are. A lot of motor vehicle accidents, a lot of things sick person, non-specific. A lot of times with the ProQA system that we use in our dispatch center, this is just kind of a the overall call that we get when somebody doesn't know what's going on, because a lot of times in the public they may or may not know what the issue is. They just see something happen and they call 911. Fire responses, 2,000 fire, a little over 2,000 fire responses, 88 structure fires, $1.5 million in damage. So again, you can see that the guys are busy every day. We continue to have a lot of fire loss and actually fire activity in our community. Station percentages, by far, headquarters station is definitely the busiest station. It is the only two-company fire, the only station that has 2 fire vehicles assigned to it every day. Everything else is a single-company station with an ambulance. And again, you can see that the call volumes are growing. I'll point out again that in our Illinois Fire Chiefs Association report that the unit utilization rates for those stations for headquarters and 3s are getting larger and larger all the time with the call volume and the areas they serve. 2 busiest units, 3 North 16 out of headquarters. And again, just for information here, we have 2,863 calls, and I have 817 calls for Engine 1. Just based on the older software we use and the hard time we have with pulling some of the data out, what that doesn't capture is when you put another ambulance in for 3 North 16 at headquarters, it may or may not show that ambulance is going out. So the ambulance out of headquarters, if I use that term, probably runs more calls than that 2,800, and the engine that's out of headquarters station probably runs more than 800 calls a year. So just so you know, that's definitely a busy station. And the second busiest vehicle is the other vehicle. It's truck 1 out of headquarters. Again, as we talked about in our budget discussion the other day, the NFPA 1710 standard, I know that you're all very used to hearing average response time. Average is probably not a very good measure, because if we go out on a couple calls and they're only 2 minutes and we go on a couple calls at 10 minutes, where are we at? We're at 5 minutes. It's probably not an average reflection of what we provide to our citizens. The NFPA uses the 90th percentile as a measure. What can we expect 90% of the time for our calls? And in the city of Bloomington right now, our 90th percentile times are 8 minutes and 10 seconds for a fire response and 9 minutes for an EMS call. A lot of times we get asked the question of why do we send a fire apparatus on an EMS call? Because if we didn't, that 9-minute time would probably even be higher. That's why we equip our engine companies with basic life support equipment so they can get there and actually provide that service faster. And this is actually due to city size, call volume, and the population. Monthly call totals, highs are at 900 calls in August. Can anybody guess why February is low? That's right, very good. The least number of, we always run February as our lowest, usually the least amount of days, averaging 837 calls, 27 calls a day average, pretty much consistent. Busiest day and slowest days do fluctuate year to year. This time it was Sunday was the busiest day and the slowest was Monday. That's an interesting trend for us. Slowest hour definitely 4 a.m., but our busiest hour, again, has fluctuated from time to time. We start to pick up our business around 8 o'clock in the morning. Business picks up immensely for us, and then actually stays pretty consistent until almost midnight, 11 o'clock, hour by hour before it starts to drop off again. Other activities and programs, in addition to just going on fire and EMS calls and service calls, our personnel do quite a bit of other things too that are really important to the community. And one of them is we partner with the water department to do our fire hydrant inspection program. The ability to have AVL in the vehicles, the automatic vehicle location, allows us to go out and do this and still keep those vehicles in service. But it is a lot of work on the guys who are already out there, running calls all day long. With over 5,000 hydrants in the community, trying to check every one of them every year to make sure that we get credit for them and that they're operating properly. But it is very important. Training. Unfortunately, to keep a fire service group highly skilled and operating safely, doing the best job they can, training is critically important. One of the big problems we have with the amount of business that we do every day is trying to get the guys through training classes. The guys on 3 North 16 at headquarters, they're lucky if they make a full training class in a day because we're training while we're on duty. So it's very, very difficult to meet these training hours. But it's very important. So we do spend a lot of time trying to make sure we meet these training hours. A lot of times when a guy's working on a Saturday or Sunday shift, they're out there doing the training to try to make up for it. Unfortunately, again, Sunday was our busiest day this year, so that was a little bit difficult for them to do. Knox Box program. If you haven't seen them before, Knox Boxes are required on all businesses and residences that have an alarm system on them. It allows us to have access to the house without having to tear the doors open. Back in the early 1980s when I came on, People didn't like it too much when there was an alarm in their building. We broke in to see what was going on, and they showed up and said, well, we had the key here. So this is a program that allows us to get entry into the building when nobody's there. We also have a maintenance program for that to make sure they operate properly. It doesn't do us any good to have the box if we can't get into it. Our ISO rating. We have an ISO rating right now of 3. I think that everybody's pretty familiar with that. Just so everybody knows, ISO is coming back in. They are actually scheduled to be here on April 14th to rate us again. They have a new rating schedule. We have not seen it yet. It will be interesting to see how we fare. So we'll see. We'll make sure to keep you informed on that. We do have the training tower. It's an excellent piece of equipment for us to get out there when we can get to it. Our personnel have found it extremely useful. I think it actually has helped us in our deployment. We have seen an increase in some of the safety on our fire grounds and some of our operational efficiencies on the fire ground as a result of having this piece of equipment, and it has paid some dividends for us instead of trying to get people out of town, which is expensive to pay the training cost to get them out. Our public education program, we have one public education officer. If you haven't met Captain McCollum, I think you need to. He does a phenomenal job. He has a program. He uses puppets to teach a lot of different various programs, not only fire safety, but bike safety, stranger danger. He is in high demand at the schools. He won the Life Safety Educator of the Year award from the state of Illinois for his programs. Very, very cutting edge. He's been asked to do all sorts of programs. He does a phenomenal job. And then on the adult side, he has puppet programs for the adults, but we do fire extinguisher training for people, and our CPR and AED training. Again, we're working cooperatively with the police department on their AED training, so we can make sure that we can use those in the public. We also partner with the Bloomington Area Career Center out of the Bloomington High School. We're trying to grow our own firefighters in the community here to start to get more and more of the young people in our community to actually apply for their fire department to be part of our department moving forward. So we've actually started a program with them that we get them through their medical responder training and hopefully can jumpstart them into the paramedic program at Heartland Community College and thereby start to get people who can test here locally who grew up here. We have a fire service users survey. As with every survey, we're having some issues in getting people to fill them out, but we have been headed out there for a while. We're trying different means of trying to get input from the public on how we provide service. So far, our marks have been very good. People think that we do a very, very good job out there, but again, I'd like to get some more data before we start to share that. And then we just started our premise alert program. I think everybody remembers the old ICI program, the invalid or child inside, and the program was discontinued due to the fact that people didn't want stickers on their windows telling somebody that was inside who might not be able to take care of themselves. With the mobile data terminals inside of the fire apparatus, people can now fill out forms online, and that information just goes right on that MDT to the firefighters to respond on the scene to let somebody know about any kind of issues inside. And that's actually cooperative with the Bloomington Police Department, and actually it's done, I think, also with Normal. So a very, very good program. We're on social media now and Facebook. And then I just want to go over some of our 2014 accomplishments. I think everybody here should be familiar with the Illinois Fire Chiefs Association report we did with all the recommendations. We're trying to base our operations on what we do to try to meet some of those benchmarks in there. We got our EMS shift supervisor signed. It was not a new hire. It was just a lateral promotion for a couple of our personnel. Aerial ladder replacement. In this year's budget, we were able to add additional firefighter per shift to try to reduce some of the overtime number. And then we also reinstated the deputy chief's position, which was vacated when I was promoted. Our focus this year has been to develop a new agreement with Central Illinois Regional Airport. We talked about our aircraft services. That agreement is set to expire in 2015. We're trying to update our dispatch radios to STARCOM so we can improve our response capabilities and our cooperation with Normal. Again, a big thing for us is continue to work with the town of Normal and see how we can improve the way that service is delivered for both communities. And then upgrade our station alerting. They'll also give us more information and help us on our turnout time. We get a minute for turnout time, and that's a pretty tight window for our personnel. And so to get them the most information in the quickest manner so that we can get the right people deployed is a real big piece of us trying to get that piece done. Some of our future needs, we've talked about reinstatement of the engine company at Station 3. The traffic signal preemption system for the community is a huge one. Some of the only way to really improve some of our response times is to be able to move traffic out of the way. And I'll just tell you, the engineering department under Jim Karch and Kevin Cothe, they know it's out there, and it's an issue that we're continuing to look at for traffic moving, not only for emergency vehicles but across the community for everything. additional ambulance for increasing EMS response. Again, we talked about one of the reasons why our response times are going up is the analogy that I think our data analyst was using when we had the interim from the AmeriCorps program was that we're like a dog chasing our tail. An ambulance goes out in a district to take a call, and then another ambulance from another district has to come over, and then that district has a call, so then an ambulance is circling around to there, and it just drives your response times up. And again, most of those calls are generated out of the headquarters district, so the thought of having another ambulance added to that station to meet that demand is again on our list. Future needs, an additional 6 personnel, again, by the IT's report would get us to the point where we could actually reduce our overtime number a lot. An upgrading of the engine company capabilities to ALS, so we can, again, when the ambulances are out, instead of just sending the BLS engine company, we can get an advanced life support ambulance out there and get definitive care to somebody. Continue collaboration with Normal. We're looking for them to start putting in AVL and see if we can start to share those resources back and forth and see if that's going to work out. And then, again, the 5 Bugles report on the major station renovation needs is still out there. And hopefully I made it on time.
Okay. Questions, comments for our distinguished chief who came in under budget? Alderman Fruin.
Mike, thank you very much. What are the couple reasons that prompt overtime? What are the highest reasons that prompt overtime?
The highest reason? Benefited leave. We have vacation and Kelly days that are allotted for personnel, and when they're not there, and also injury, job injury, those 3 things, it's really to fill the seats in the vehicles to get them back out the door. Those are the biggest reasons why. In the fire chief's report, if you look at the IT's report, there's a recommendation for how many people you should have on a shift. If you've got 29 seats, right now we're at, I think we're at 34 people with the 3 we hire, which we haven't even gotten in yet, 34 people to cover those. And if you have 3 vacation slots and 3 Kelly Day slots, you're already in a whole 1. And then if you get somebody on job injury or somebody sick, we're already into 2. And I think our average call-in per day is about 3 to 3.5 people a day to cover those seats.
And the people that called in, are they in a comparable position than the person that's not available to work? In other words, an EMS person replaces an EMS person?
Yes and no. I mean, it depends. It depends on how many people can be moved on the shift. I'll tell you, it's a very complex system. We were really looking for the Munis process to be able to give us there's products out there that help with what we call staffing models, so you can actually do that. But for example, an ARF driver, the guy that rides the crash truck, has to be certified. So if he's gone for the day, we have to get somebody who's certified. Sometimes what that means is we can move a guy from another engine who is ARF certified into that position and call somebody to fill in for him. If we need a paramedic, though, we need a paramedic. If we need an officer, we need an officer.
In order, Alderman Milwambwe, followed by Schmidt and Fazzini.
Sure. Okay, I have a couple easy questions. First one would be, I know on Saturday you talked about the number 6 minutes. So could you explain for us again why the 6 minutes is what you shoot for, why it's important?
There are two reasons why, one for fire and one for EMS. On the fire side, there's something called the fire propagation curve, and what it does is that it's a model that's been around for a long time that predicts how long it takes when a room catches on fire, when there's an object that catches on fire in a room, how long it takes that room to reach what we call flashover, which is when the entire room and all the combustibles within that room light on fire. And for anybody who's seen the sprinkler demonstration, that's when that whole room goes on fire. And once that happens, you cannot survive in that environment. There's no survivability. And the fire propagation curve, which was done years ago, says that at 10-minute mark, that room goes to flashover. So we try to get there in 6 minutes because, again, then you have deployment time and everything else to try to interrupt that by putting water on the fire. The one other issue with that is that we're getting more and more studies out, and I don't know how many people have been paying attention, but now with the furnishings that have been put into residential homes, with all the plastics and everything, which are basically hydrocarbon fuels, we have changed the dynamic of house fires in the United States and actually in building fires. We are putting basically more fuel load into all these homes with the, it used to be that, chairs were stuffed with cotton batting and wool coverings, and now they're basically have foam cushions in them. So we've actually changed the dynamic. So getting there rapidly is very, very important for that. So that's your 6 minutes for on the fire side. On the EMS side, 4 to 6 minutes, irreversible brain damage starts to occur in somebody in cardiac arrest. So we shoot for that 6-minute mark to try to make sure we can get there so we can get definitive care, make sure that we can actually do something to reverse that trend. And that's why those things are used as national standards.
Other question I have is the ISO rating is 3 for us, right?
3, correct, right now.
What's the highest?
1.
Oh, 1. Okay. So what do we need to get there?
When are we going to get to 1?
Yes.
How much money do you want to spend to get there?
Okay. All right.
Alderwoman Schmidt.
I also wanted to underscore your presentation from Saturday. That was very sobering, and I appreciate you sharing that. I really feel like, we have both a legal and a moral obligation to address that gap to get us faster response time. I had on the now defunct safety committee, the opportunity to get out to some of the stations and see what some of your folks are working with. It's really educational, and we talked about having that opportunity again, and I strongly encourage
Absolutely.
it. And finally, I want to give a shout out for Brad McCullum. I've seen him. He's been to my workplace a couple times, and what we learned from him and the way that we think about disaster training in my library and on our university is, I give it to him for helping us get our hands around that. So thank you.
Alderman Fazzini.
Yeah, Chief, where's the tipping point between adding more people and saving overtime? If you add one person, do you save more than that in overtime? And if you add 3, do you still save more in overtime?
When we looked at the Illinois Fire Chiefs Association report, and we looked at the amount of overtime, we start looking at the number of people we call in per day.
Mm-hmm.
What I did and I've talked to City Manager Hales about it is what we tried to look at is that it has a lot to do with how many seats you have to fill each day. So and then how much you're budgeting for your overtime. So what I looked at is that right now a brand new firefighter is $50,000 a year. Now, and using our HR department to try to run numbers on all the benefits that you have to figure in, they gave me a number 80, and I said, how about 100%? Let's just use 100%. We'll go to $100,000 per person. And what we figured is for every firefighter we hired at $50,000 a year, that we would give the city manager $100,000 back out of our overtime budget. Now, the one caveat I want to tell you is that that's all fine until I get a couple of catastrophic injuries. But just for our day-to-day operations of making sure we can give the benefit of leave and cut some of that overtime, that system should work.
Okay, so it's one-on-one. Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Stearns and then Painter.
Actually, that was my question too. So if we hire all 3 of the people that we actually need, then our overtime budget will go to
$300,000. In fact, this year's budget, when we talked about the 17 personnel in the overall budget, there are 3 firefighters in there. And part of what our balancing act is that if we take those 3 firefighters out, I'm going to ask for $300,000 back in the overtime budget to start covering those seats.
So it's kind of a break even.
Yes, it is.
Okay, and we appreciate that. Now, in terms of the issues of time, okay, will the 3 people, how will that affect?
It will not.
It will not affect it at all.
And the only way that it will affect it, and again, we are looking at these things, but in the Illinois Fire Chiefs Association report, we had a lot of conversation with them and their numbers. If we get to 9 extra personnel, 3 extra per shift, whereas we just put 1 on this year, we have another 3 that we're kind of in the budget for you next year. What we looked at is how many days of the year, and again, we're having to do this by hand with our data records, so it's very tedious. But if we had 3 extra people per shift, how many times would we actually have? Would we be riding heavy on apparatus? If I've got 29 seats to fill, how many times would I have 31? Because if I get to 31 for a day, because we don't have anybody on vacation or something like that, we can put another ambulance in service. Now, that's not going to be an everyday thing. That would be depending on those types of situations. So it would be we would see opportunities. Right now, the number of times where we have an extra person on shift is like twice a year.
Wow, only twice?
Yeah.
2 days? Is that it?
And usually they're a holiday.
Wow.
So if you get to the point where you have extra people on shift, 20 days, 60 days, how many days, can you anticipate you're going to have extra personnel? And again, a lot of it too, with as we talked about in our meeting, 41-year-old average employees, how many injuries do we have and things like that. So it's very hard for me to guess, because the first time I say that, we end up with 2 job injuries and we're back to minimum staffing again.
And just a couple more quick things. Do you ever get into a situation as far as enforced overtime? I mean, is that in the contract and all that where you can force? And have you ever been in a situation where you just didn't have the people? You know, you just couldn't do even the minimum staffing because you didn't have the overtime and the people that, how often do you think that has even happened?
It's not happening a lot, but it does happen.
Okay.
And we call it running short.
Oh, running short.
There are, and we have to make decisions. Typical what happens is that the EMS supervisor, that goes first, and then after that, then we're into trying to figure it out.
Wow. Well, and lastly now, these staffing things, does that have to do with our rating? You know, the rating that you mentioned, the ISO and all that?
It will have some impact. The one thing I don't want to go too far on is I have not seen ISO's new schedule. I know in the past it's based on how many engine companies, and one of the things that we had to do post our last ISO visit, which was almost 10 years, it's been about 7 or 8 years ago, is our city has expanded since then, so they're going to look at that they're going to look at that mileage where you're at that we looked at the chart the other day, and they're also going to see that, for example, the engine company that we had at number 3 station, we shifted to 6 station, so we're going to be a little lean on some of those things, and that could have an adverse impact on our ISO rating, yes.
Wow. Well, I know we don't want to get into compromising public safety in any way, shape, or form when we're, you know, heaven forbid, running short and have have one of those days, which certainly could happen. So I really appreciate what you're telling us, and I think we need to think first about, public safety. Thank you very much.
Actually, before I move on to Alderwoman Painter, I wonder if I could have a question. Now, the addition of 3 firefighters would not directly affect the response times, but aren't they part of a necessary component for you in your overall operations to begin to move down that path?
Well, there were a couple of things we asked for in this year's budget. Actually, I'll be honest, I asked for 12. I asked for 9 for a new engine company, and then 3 to alleviate the overtime situation and try to address some of those things. But yes, any staffing does help. Again, you're right. If we end up with 20 days out of the year that we have 2 personnel extra, we'll put an extra ambulance in service. So those things will be able to occur with more staffing that we do gradually, right? And if we put an extra ambulance in service, could we see a reduction in response times? Absolutely. We will see that reduction.
Okay, thank you. Alderwoman Painter, thank you.
Hi, I just wanted to add to Alderwoman Karen, just that I think what you do is really critical. And if we could somehow find some funding for you, I think that would really be a good thing, because this is about people living and dying. And I really appreciate everything that everybody does at the fire department, and I just hope we can work something out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other comments?
I would just like to leave you with one. I think one of the most disheartening things that I've heard in my career as a chief is when we have someone call and complain and say that, they had one of their family members fall, had a very serious head injury, and our guys did everything they could to get there as rapidly as they could. And when she called to complain, she said it took them 7 or 8 minutes to get there. And, I'm looking at this thing and I'm thinking, it's amazing our guys got there in 7 or 8 minutes. It was absolutely amazing they did. And her question to them was, well, if I said my husband or my father would have had a heart attack, would you have gotten here any faster? And our guys are like, no, ma'am, this is a true emergency. We treated it as such, and we couldn't have done any better. And that's the situation, unfortunately, that our firefighters are in just every day. People look at them and say, what took you so long? What took you so long? And they're like, we're doing the best we can. And it's not just staffing. It's deployment areas. I mean, the city continues to grow, and we have a huge footprint now. And just trying to make sure we've got the resources in all these areas as we're spread out is very difficult. So just keep that in mind, that even putting another vehicle in some stations, may have a very little improvement, on some of the fringe areas of our community just based on its overall size.
Now, in terms of the response time problems, I'm assuming it would be like Alderman Fruin's ward, Alderman Milwamboy's ward, and then maybe the Grove in Alderman Fazzini's ward that would have the biggest difficulties of response times?
And
and Sage's. Oh. Right.
They are all, issues. Now, again, the one thing about development is that it goes slow. You have your 90%, your response times on those areas. If you have to meet your 90th percentile, you're still going to make it. And I think sometimes, when people move into areas on the fringe of our community, hopefully they know that those areas are going to be a little bit more difficult to serve than somebody's in the core area of the community. But I don't know if that's always the case.
Right. Thank you. Other questions, comments? Thank you very much. Absolutely excellent job. Thank you. We're going to move then right along to a city manager's discussion. Mr.
Mayor and Council, the one thing I would ask you tonight, and that it's in our committee of the whole, Vasu made a presentation on the timeline and the scope of work for the comprehensive plan. What we are proposing that on the so-called steering committee, which will be made up of a number of individuals, including the mayor, city managers, some directors, some chairmen of committees, we are hoping that we could maybe get 2 aldermen in addition to the mayor to serve on that steering committee. Vasu was here today just giving us a monthly update at our director of staff meeting, but I would just request the mayor and the council to consider is, could we get 2 aldermen to serve on that comprehensive plan steering committee to join others? We are trying to schedule monthly meetings. We are going to look at how we can accommodate both people who work and don't work, but that is the one thing we're hoping.
And what's the timetable on that? When would we need people to tell me, step up to the plate and tell you?
As soon as possible, hopefully this week.
Okay.
So that we can really,
okay.
We need to get those, and we'll be sharing too this every month. We'll be giving you an update, what's going on with the comp plan, what staff doing. Right now, we're still in a lot of data gathering, but we do feel it'd be important and beneficial to have, again, 2 aldermen volunteer, get with the mayor so that we could submit those names to the Regional and Planning Commission. And with that, I'll wait. I think there's some reports. I did send out an email today on our One Voice trip, which really just gives all council members some of the mental health information. So, but I do think the mayor and several of the aldermen want to make some comments, and I'll come back and follow up with anything else that may come after those comments on One Voice and the NLC trip.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, I'm going to be reserving most of my mayoral comments to a budget reaction, budget message. But I do want to say that we, actually, I was sick then 2 weeks ago in D.C., so I don't know what's going on here. And I want to certainly thank Alderwoman Stearns for joining us on the One Voice trip. We did speak with our congressional representatives. We spoke with some undersecretaries. And actually, Alderwoman Stearns and I were there of the Department of Health and Human Services about our mental health situation. And in the National League of Cities, which I had Alderman Black and Millawambwe join us. We certainly had some very interesting panel discussions. One was 3 hours on downtown. And frankly, when I heard the stories of other people throughout the country, I thought, wow, they must have come to Bloomington and they've gone elsewhere. And one of the things, though, that is certainly comforting is that there are many communities that are similar to our size that are infill. One was between Tacoma, Washington, and Seattle, another, and 2 others in the suburbs of Dallas and Houston, that they're trying to build a core in a downtown. They don't have one. They want a soul. We've got ours. We just have to, work on it. So in many ways, we found that we had similarities, but our task at hand was perhaps not as steep as others. And I will let Alderwoman Stearns in her remarks perhaps comment further on the One Voice, and perhaps Alderman Black and Millawambwe on the National League of Cities environment. Mostly what I want to talk about tonight, and I ask for your indulgence, but this is really important, is our budget. And on Saturday, I think we made some really important progress in our budget meeting. We indicated, although of course not unanimously, that we accepted the city manager's street resurfacing option to do $10 million and not the 4, but not new positions, keep our bold public safety pension funding policy, and perhaps an amusement tax to close some of the deficit, and a tentative exploration of a gas tax at some point for future road resurfacing. And while this is certainly progress, I think our work is incomplete. And as my concerns are that we still have a budget that is millions of dollars in the red, And we made absolutely no progress in specifying how to pay for the bold pension policy. When we approved this pension policy last November, I tried to nudge the City Council to adopt a way to fund the increased costs. And specifically, what I had talked about and had been talking about for several months was a public utility tax that was earmarked for public pensions. I think recently the discussion of the public utility tax was confused. I think some people thought we were talking about it to fund new positions. Anyway, but the public utility tax would have paid off most of the steep increases over the next few years and put us on a responsible path for the next generation. And at the time, we said we didn't want to do that now, but we would do it during the budget process. Well, here we are in the budget process, and we still haven't stepped up to the plate to figure out how to pay for our bold policy. And to me, that's very disturbing. I've thought about this predicament a lot over the last 48 hours and the overall budget situation. And frankly, I've concluded that I can't sign a budget that reflects the incomplete directives from our Saturday meeting. And that is, I think we need to give a realistic set of budget options to the city manager and prioritize public safety. And if we're going to have a bold policy, we've got to identify how we're going to pay for it. Otherwise, we're not being honest. We're not being responsible. We're kicking the can down to future councils and future generations. And frankly, we know we're cleaning up a lot of mess for decades in the past. And at some point, I think we need to step up to the plate and make that happen. Without a means to pay for it, this bold policy is not really one we're pursuing. One of the two things I must insist on as mayor, I think, in this budget, both have to do with public safety. And the first is find a way either to pay for the public pensions, a revenue stream that bond agencies will like, or abandon the policy. The second thing I think I need to insist upon in our budget is that we add the 3 firefighter positions that were requested by Mr. Kimmerling. Again, I hope we can come together, just as we did after the solid waste situation where we were deadlocked on solid waste. And I said, okay, let's do this in the next 2 weeks. Let's begin the next morning. Let's begin discussions. And we kind of ultimately got a compromise, not one that we necessarily liked or wanted, but one that worked. So I guess what I'm saying is, as far as I'm concerned, everything's on the table, but I can't sign. So I will veto a budget that doesn't prioritize public safety, our pensions, and our fire department. The council, in our system of checks and balances, can override my veto with a supermajority at the following council meeting. Now, to my knowledge, the mayoral veto has never been used in Bloomington, but I can't sign a budget that will be harmful to our city, if I believe that's the case, and I do, its employees, our citizens, and future generations. So I'm hopeful we can come back to the table, find an agreement. There was little support on Saturday for a public utility tax, at least in the abstract. I'll make the case for it briefly. But again, anything's on the table, as I believe it's our best options for a lot of reasons to earmark that money for public safety pensions. But the only other thing that I would ask as we begin to meet is we check our rhetoric at the door. We don't need to say we're for creative cuts. I mean, who's not for creative cuts? At this point, we need to make real progress. The tire's hitting the pavement, and our budget timetable time clock is ticking. Now, why did I support the public utility tax to begin with? And frankly, when I unveiled it and explained it to people of many different walks of life on many different radio stations, 92.9 on one end, WGLT on the other end, WJBC, people in many different environments, when I said, we have a public utility tax that's half the level of normal. All of other taxes are at the same level. And so are all of the communities that are comparable to us in over 100 miles. So we're not at any competitive disadvantage. Decatur, Springfield, Champaign, Urbana, Peoria, as well as Normal. And so if you explain it that way, not that anybody likes taxes. I mean, everybody hates taxes. I don't want to pay taxes, right? But there are some times where we've got to do that and step up to the plate. Our general fund revenues have not gone up in 5 years. Everything in the economy costs us more. And why should the general fund revenues in Bloomington and our services be the one exception? And we know it's not, right? There really aren't any free lunches. So I do support it, and we do know that there are some concerns about its regressivity. And actually, Alderwoman Schmidt and I, have talked about some possibilities, apparently, and talked with our city manager, that we could conceivably have a little box on our water bill where people check $1 or $2 that would voluntarily go into a fund, just like you do on your NICOR gas bill, where you could help some people who are on fixed incomes to get through perhaps winters in some situations, or perhaps, summers might be with an electric bill. So there are certainly some possibilities, creative possibilities, where we can maybe mitigate some of the negative consequences of it. But I think we have to focus not just on the revenue and expenditure side and what the implications are going to be. So we do have lots of options in front of us. And I do think that especially if we make it clear to the public, and I have in the past, I'm starting now, I'll continue to do it, if we are interested in that option, that this is not a increase to go for new positions. This is a tax on public utility that will be earmarked by ordinance for pensions. And it mostly gets us the way on the pension side for nearly 30 years. We got a few bumps maybe in year 4 and 5, but it mostly gets us down to that path. So obviously, even though I'm in favor of this, as I said, everything ought to be on the table. There are lots of other options. Another option is we just repeal the bold public safety policy. I don't think we should do that, but at least we're being honest to our constituents. We don't have a policy that we're not pursuing. I didn't run for mayor to avoid the tough decisions, and I'm not going to start now. So I made my position clear, and I hope that we can begin the process of talking with the public and others. We know that we don't just have problems this year. We know we've got continuing problems, but we're not going to be as caught off guard next year. We're going to have better numbers. We're going to be able to work on things like maybe saving $75,000 here, $50,000 here, to try to ease some of the pressures over the next year. But right now, I think we've got obligations, and I have to say, Alderman Lauer, I have the greatest respect for you. In fact, not only do I think you have a good soul, but if I were in a foxhole in a foreign land, I want you next to me. But I have to say, I disagree with your comment to the city manager that it's up to the city manager to roll up his sleeves. I think it's up to us to roll up our sleeves. We are supposed to be the brains of the operation, and the city manager and staff are supposed to be the fingers. We wouldn't say to our fingers, oh, hey, go make me dinner. I don't care whether there's meat. I don't care if it's chicken. I don't care if it's chicken cordon bleu. I don't care if it's just lemon meringue pie or it's just carrots. Go make me dinner. We wouldn't do that. We've got to give clear directives. And I think we began that path, but we didn't finish our job on Saturday. And what I say is I invite the council, let's finish our job. Let's begin tomorrow to go down that path, because I really believe that we have to have a budget that truly values public safety and is responsible. And so that's where I'm coming from. I'm sure others will have some comments, and I look forward to working with all of us in the next several weeks to make this happen. Thank you. And others want to, I'm sure lots of people will want to speak. I'm going to go from my left to right, not politically necessarily. Alderman Fruin, and let's just keep going.
Yeah, Mayor, thank you. And totally independent of your comments, which I appreciate. I'll share this email with everyone tonight when I get home, but it's simply a resident's interest to know a little bit more about the amusement tax and how it applies and who it applies to and so forth. They sent it to Rob and I think the reason for that, it's clearly outlined in the email, is I think it's a resident, it is a resident of Ward 9 and a business owner, same person, business owner Ward 8, but I think it's got some good questions about how it applies, and so maybe when I send it, maybe when David gets it, maybe he can have somebody on staff take a look at it, and just one of those small pieces that we need to make sure we understand where it applies and who it applies to and what the impact is. So kind of a small thing, but
Awesome. Thank you.
I'll share that later tonight. Thank you.
Alderman Fazzini.
Yeah, two things. The first one is the concept of getting the council package in pieces. This time around, we got the council package one day, and then later we got something from Luther Oaks, and then at a different time, we got something on another area, the bond, I think, on the bond. And anyway, it came in three pieces. And in one case, when I asked the question, they said, well, that was very rare that we were trying to accommodate Luther Oaks. I need to accommodate us. And I don't want to not accommodate people who want to put things in at the last minute, but that's got to stop. So my request is that we get our package all together. And if somebody doesn't make a deadline, well, then they just go to the next meeting.
Okay. There might, again, I don't I would think that there might be some situations where it is critical for us.
There might. And when it said very rare, I thought, yeah, very rare, except it's been happening every week or every meeting. It's not very rare. I can live with very rare.
Okay.
That's all. Just, I don't
We'll
know.
chat and then we'll talk about it.
Yeah, if the
thank you.
rest don't mind it, then that's my problem.
Alderman Black.
No, I'm not done.
Oh, I'm sorry.
One other issue. You mentioned being honest. In the budget session, it was very frustrating for me at the budget session. I think if we take the $4 million that we put in for roads, streets, and sewers and eliminate it, just because we voted to have a $10 million bond, that we are now taking $4 million out of that bond and using it for operating expenses. That's dishonest, and I will not vote for that. I'm just letting you know.
Okay. Alderman Black.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll make some comments about the budget, and I'd like to circle back to comments about the National League of Cities after I think we all have some comments about in reaction to your speech. When it comes to the budget, I left Saturday kind of confused as to where everybody was at, and I always want to make sure we're giving staff clear direction, because when I ran for this office, a lot of times people would say that they're dissatisfied with City Hall and they're mad at the council, and as we talked about it, it became clear that there was some miscommunication, or it seemed like the council wasn't being clear with what staff wanted and not communicating expectations properly. So one of the things that I wanted to do, and I've tried to do over the last now 9 months, 10 months at this point, has been to be clear. And after I left the budget session, I thought that we were more or less clear, but then Karen had sent an email later that night regarding the chief's comments and presentation, and I would encourage everyone to go online and check out the YouTube video of the entire budget session, and I'll circle back to that in a minute. But what really struck me is that when people call for service for anything that we do, whether it be fire, police, public works, people have an expectation of a high-performing, well-trained employee that's ready to go, equipped to do the job that they're expected to do. And that costs money, and that costs training, that costs time, that's a commitment that we're making to our citizens. And I think that that's not unreasonable that they expect that. So when the city manager comes to us and asks for personnel or training or additional staff to fill those gaps, I think it is incumbent upon us to take that request very seriously. And I also think it's incumbent upon us to be very clear about, if we want to see those additional resources placed and we don't want to raise taxes, what specifically are we willing to give up? And I was struck by Patty Lynn Silva's discussion about the structural deficit that we have in terms of our operating expenses. And this isn't something that we can cut our way out of. I mean, I am all for cuts and creative uses. I mean, we can get behind technology left and right, and we can save money here, we can save money there. But we've come to a point at a crossroads where we might find ourselves not able to deliver the quality of service that our citizens are expecting. And I don't want to see us get into a position where we have nickeled and dimed everything, where the citizens aren't getting the service, and then there's an outrage saying we need more, we need more, we need more, and then we are asked as a council to provide a giant leap in funding mechanisms for that. So if we need to create new revenue to provide the services that the citizens are expecting, we should do that. It's incumbent upon us to do that. And after I left the meeting, I took a number of phone calls from people, as I expected to. I took one from this person, and they were okay that I shared the story. I did ask them for it, and they're very upset about the idea of taxes and very, very angry about it. And I kind of walked them through how we got to this point, and I encouraged them to check out the YouTube clip of the entire council session. Now, I don't think they watched the entire 6 hours and 10 minutes of it, but they watched the highlights of it. And they ended up calling me back and seeing it more from our perspective. Now, we don't necessarily agree on where the revenue can come from. They're of the opinion that cuts can be more are appropriate, but at least there's that understanding that we are making an effort to reach that communication bridge. So I'm all for making sure that we have all options on the table, but what does that mean? I'd like to see the fire positions restored. I think that's critical. I think that I would not want to be in a situation where somebody has an issue and they call for service and we can't provide it. I want to see whatever we can do to make sure we fund those pensions, ideally a dedicated revenue stream. When I ran for this office, people asked me, what are you going to do about pensions? Here's our opportunity to do it. I don't want to be rolling back any of my promises that I've made. So when we talk about moving forward, I want to see some cuts, but I also want to make sure that these things are still on the table, because that's what the people of Ward 7 have communicated to me, and that's what I'm representing. Thank you.
Alderman Schmidt.
Thank you, Mayor, for taking such a forthright stand on this and getting us refocused on the job at hand. I want to take just a moment to reflect on Saturday, as Scott has, and I think I went away feeling very discouraged, first of all, because I think we end up a lot of times in antagonistic positions with the staff when in fact we're we're on the same team and we want the same thing. And so first of all, I want to say thank you very much to David and Patty Lynn and Carla and Justine and everybody else who has put hours and hours and hours into crafting this budget. And we appreciate what you do, and we know that we're working together for the same community that we all love. When it comes to the utility tax, I keep reflecting on something that Johnny said on Saturday and has said otherwise, I think. A lot of this has to do with education and with, I've said to you, Mayor, that 9 out of 10 people have said to me, both from Main Street and from, just Joe Citizen, that utility tax hits the people who are least able to pay for it. It goes after money for things that people can't avoid. People use water, people use electricity. I've had calls from small businessmen saying, I'm working here on the margin, and it's going to be really hard for me if you do this. I think it's incumbent upon us to help everybody understand what those choices mean. So if we don't do this, then what? And you've talked about public safety, and you've talked about our commitment to a very robust pension funding plan. And so I think we need to help people understand that if we don't do a utility tax or we don't find some other way to address this, then the consequences are significant to us. And I don't think we've really taken the time to do that, and that's something that I think we need to do. So
Absolutely.
having those community conversations in the short time that we have left to us is very, very important. And I want to be able to go back out to the people that I've sent all my emails to and say, you've said this to me, now here's the consequence of that. Tell me more what you're thinking. And I hope we can very quickly kind of frame that up.
But just FYI, I think tomorrow morning I'm on Cities 92.9 and I'm on WJBC and GLT. So I'll begin that, in the broader sense too, in a broader sense, making, the case. One thing, for example, I had a gentleman stop me this morning in the gym and said, basically he said, just don't raise my taxes. And I said, well, okay, I understand that. And well, what do you want us to cut? And, we don't have too many firefighters, we don't have too many cops, and we don't have too many public service workers. And he said, no, those are all good. And he talked, sorry, John, don't hold your chest. He said, well, Parks and Rec. I said, well, you realize if we eliminated all of Parks and Rec, just eliminated everything, okay, nobody's going to come here. It'll destroy all kinds of things in terms of our quality of life. But that costs us $7 million, right? It's $14 million, and then you guys bring in roughly about half of your revenue. So that's not even going to cover our structural deficit. Right? I mean, that's a way to sort of dramatically say, okay, just stop Parks and Rec, right? And we're still not there just this year. So the nature of it is really, really, really sobering. I'm sorry, this is supposed to be council comment. I apologize. Alderwoman Painter.
Well, let me get this clear. Everybody around us has this utility tax. Is that correct?
At 5%, right? And we're 2.5%.
Okay.
Approximately. There's slight differences.
And we want to raise it up to what they have?
Correct.
And how much will that bring in?
Ultimately a little over $4 million. Not in the first year because it takes a while to phase in.
Okay.
And if it's earmarked for pensions, that solves, most of our pension problems, at least puts us within striking distance. I think it's pretty safe to say for 30 years.
Okay. Okay, well, and these are the only taxes that we get to choose from here.
Well, no. I mean, we could raise property taxes. Usually, actually, I think one of the reasons why why all the communities, within over 100 miles of us that are comparable to us have gone up that path is they wanted to stay away from property taxes. And actually, we're also one of the least reliant on property taxes. It's hard to find a city that only has 14 cents on the dollar from property taxes. I think it's Also, there are a variety of reasons. Now, I don't know that anybody else has earmarked it for pensions. I think that's the only reason why we would do it, and why it might be acceptable to some, and obviously, to not others. And normal, I mean, one of the things I also pointed out about in normal, normal has double the debt load that we have, and they've got a AAA bond rating. It's because historically, normal knows how to pay their bills and manage their finances. Now, we don't like everything that they've done, but the bond rating agencies trust them. They don't trust us. I don't mean us personally, but Bloomington over time. And I mean, that's our biggest obstacle, is decisive action to having a AAA bond rating, not our debt level.
Okay. But we couldn't bring property taxes to the table for this budget.
You could bring property taxes to the table. You could, sales taxes could be earmarked. I mean, there are a variety of things that could be earmarked as a dedicated fund stream. Otherwise, in a sense, it leaves it up to all and future councils to decide whether or not they want to fund that pension policy if there's not a dedicated fund stream.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Stearns.
Thank you. Well, first I want to congratulate you on your, firm stand on possibly vetoing the budget. I actually did that 2 years in a row. I voted no. And I put out a press release and a paper, and I'd love to just bring it in right now, because what it says is exactly this. This is where we're going, for sure. It's unsustainable. We can't ever catch up if we keep passing what I called and what I will call a status quo budget. And, excuse me, I want to come out like the rest of us do for public safety. I think every single one of us stands with public safety, understands the ramifications, and considers it an absolute core service. But have to catch my breath here. To say that utility taxes, apparently is the only way, I don't accept that.
No, I didn't say that it was the only way.
Well, it seems to be the...
No, I was saying, I said I supported it. Everything's on the table.
Okay.
Alderwoman Painter asked me what the options are, other options for
Right.
dedicated funding,
Right.
and I believe the only other dedicated funding options, right, are the property tax,
Okay.
to say that that's going there,
Right.
and the sales tax.
And we can raise every
As a
tax.
tax.
We can raise every tax in the books as much as we want and keep doing it. And frankly, I think we have done it. And the management letter of last year's CAFR talks about very dramatic increases in our services, our fees, our taxes. They also talk about the fact that outside of Metro Chicago, we are probably the most expensive city to live in outside of Metro Chicago. Those statistics are all out there. And here's the thing. If we raise utility taxes, if we create another $4 or $5 million in revenue, and continue with the trend in our general fund, which has gone up, I believe, what was the percentage this year? I don't know, 8 or 9%, something like that. A pretty dramatic. If we continue spending, we are every year, our general fund, our city, our population is not growing as much because it has flattened out. Yes, we had a huge spurt in the 90s, the early 2000s. Population is totally flattened, but the general fund is continuing to rise. And I think I'm going to wrap this up by just saying, yes, by all means, I think we should ask our citizens, and I think we're going to hear from them. There are core citizens that a city provides. We all know what they are: water, refuse, streets, public safety, maybe even first more than anything else. None of us, if we can't continue living, or if we're attacked by criminals, we can't live here. But water, public safety, we all know that. Are there other things in the city? Absolutely. Lots of other things. And when we came in on Saturday, I pointed out, and got a lot of pushback, which I expected. I held up the newspaper article that said our intention was to have 2 assistant city managers, all kinds of administrative changes, in fact, millions of dollars in new administrative hires. That was our intention, and that's what really confuses me, because it's, in my view, and just my view, it's the exact wrong direction. So what I'm concerned about is where's the will and where's the intention? What are we really thinking and trying and hoping for here? To be lean with our city staff and with other things than core services? The public can answer that. And just today I scheduled a ward meeting, so I will be able to hear from it will be my meeting, and I will hear from my constituents and my citizens. And of course, everyone's welcome. But anyway, just to wind up, if I believed that taxing our way out of this would even help us in the future, our pension payments are going to double in about 6 years, and all the utility taxes in the world right now are not going to fix that, and it's not going to be sustainable no matter what we tax. We, in the city of Bloomington, this is my view, I appreciate everyone's understanding, it's just my view, we have a spending problem, and we better get a hold of it, because all the taxes in the world are not going to fix it. And in 5 years, we'll be right back if we don't address the spending spree that the city of Bloomington, Normal does have a AAA. It doesn't have a Coliseum, in all fairness. It didn't leave Metcom. Normal made a lot of very good decisions, and we've made other decisions, and we are where we are. So we better fix our spending problem. That's just my view. Thank you.
When's your ward meeting? Okay, thank you. Alderman Sage.
Two comments and maybe a question. There was some statement made about the Luther Oaks and the council packet being part of the council packet, and it simply was not. That was driven by the residents of Luther Oaks. They were communicating again, their continued hopes and aspirations. It was a petition. And so in terms of anything that was linked to the items on the agenda tonight, there really wasn't direct linkage to those. So to say that the council packet was held up because of some Luther Oaks paperwork is not accurate. Secondly, in terms of the budget meeting, David, let me ask, what would you like specific line item feedback from the alderman on things to be cut? Would you rather see it at the program level? I know I talked in some general terms, but at least talked about Parks and Rec on Saturday. How deep of a dive can I provide to you in terms of the kind of feedback that you're looking for specifically on any potential cuts in services?
Well, let me first say that, and I think it's been said before, this council puts a high priority on public safety, puts a high priority on streets, and many other things, but and that there's this desire to prioritize. At some point in time, what would be most helpful, I think, for everyone is if the council were to identify what are those least supportive programs or services that you would propose to eliminate. Not line items, because you get into such minutia.
Right.
We really need to look at programs and service categories, because our staff just cannot keep up even with the status quo.
Okay.
And that's, and we just saw it tonight, some of the response times again, how we're not even meeting the national standard on 90%. And even the 3 firefighters isn't going to change that, but it's dealing with the overburdened, overworked, so much overtime, of the firefighters. But let me also just reiterate, as the council requested, I'm working with the directors. We are going to come back to you with my recommendation for $2.5 million of cuts. It'll be focused on programs, on services, or whatever we can do. We were even talking about fees and other things too, but I'll be bringing that back to you as soon as we prepare that. Hopefully that will provide some further points for discussion. But it's, so I hope that helps answer your question.
Because I'm willing to identify specific programs. Is it your suggestion that we wait to hear those recommendations coming back from you before we kind of take the next step in this conversation?
I'm not taking a position on that per se, because I
Okay.
think even in the retreat last fall, there was that desire of the council to, react or to give some of theirs. And I know sometimes it's difficult. You can say you're opposed to maybe raising taxes and fees, and it is. It's very difficult. But what would you cut in the budget? And I think the more you can, be specific on programs and services, the better. We have two budget documents that are very specific on the programs, the services that are out there, and what the city is currently providing, which I believe is integral to have the quality of life we have here in the city of Bloomington. I fear that we start getting into cutting or having to gut too many programs, even parks, recreation, cultural arts. I'll be the first to say, from an economic development, a business retention, business attraction, CEOs want to look for what do we want to offer in quality of life. It is not it is not the type of term that I think we want to diminish the importance of many of these other services we provide in this community. But I think we've got a lot of great programs. It's taken a lot of years, but we really cut back on staff back in 2009, over 70 full-time positions, and as I said before, our employees are struggling. I mean, the morale, even right now, this morning, employees are coming in, wondering if their jobs are secured. Do they need to start looking? If the council's looking for $2.5 million in cuts, morale is tanked again because there's a lot of concern about, is this 2009 and 10 all over again? And is this a city that they want to continue to work for? Because it seems like we continue to go through these challenging times, which we don't necessarily see with the town of Normal and many others. So,
Well, I will repeat something I've said up here now for I think the better part of 4 years during the budget conversation, and that is I am willing to make those decisions on service cuts. I never saw, I didn't have any options really to look at. Again, I remember the first year we talked about this. I remember the mayor and others, the phrase that year was draconian cuts, and but there again, I never had the opportunity to give specific feedback on what programs or what services. So I've been prepared all along to take some services and off the city's table, and by extension, I think lessen some of the demands placed on our employees. And quite honestly, I look forward to that opportunity to being able to look at some of those services. And as I said Saturday, have I think a very quick conversation with people in my ward about those. But until I have something to react to, some context of cuts, for me it seems premature to say that I'm willing to go forward with a tax increase until I have some idea, some framework around what $2.5 million in cuts might look like, or $3.5 million, or whatever the situation may be, because we're going to put that information out to the folks in our wards, and they're going to prioritize some of those in their own minds, and give us that feedback. But again, I welcome the opportunity to at least give you some feedback and some direction.
And if you could CC me, I'd love it too. So, I mean, I think the sooner the better, right? Because I mean, time's of the essence. So I would say ideas, sooner the better. Thank you.
Oh yeah, I'll provide that.
Perfect.
What I heard was programs, not line items in the budget.
Absolutely, that's good.
And sure, I'll be glad to kind of expand on some part of my conversation on Saturday. I'll give you some programs, and some decreased subsidizations of some of the other programs that we have. Not public safety, not infrastructure, not public works, but I think in some of those other areas where I think they're more about quality of life, We've got some financial issues we've got to manage, and it may be that some of those perceived quality of life issues will just have to be impacted by our need to address some real pressing financial issues.
Alderman Milwaukee, last but not least.
Well, thank you.
Oh, second to last.
Second to last. Okay, thank you. Where do I begin? So Saturday, I mean, the budget meeting was very interesting. Um, I guess I did not walk away from it feeling as negative as others might have, because I have a tendency to be hopeful. And I hope that the staff as well, take it from me, that the staff remains positive. The way I took it is, well, we have something challenging to deal with, some things that are challenging to deal with. And it may take a little bit of time to work itself out. That's why I referenced the solid waste discussion, and I thought eventually we all came around to something together. So I remain hopeful. I don't think now is the time to be looking for jobs. Let's see what we can do. I do think that with the staff's presentations, especially John's presentation on some of the quality of life venues that we have, were pretty interesting because it helped me understand the economic impact of some of those venues. So I think at this point, I'm looking more to see what those cuts will be, what those cuts might be. Because so far as I know, what people have heard and have seen in the headlines is that, one, the city is looking to add staff, and then two, that the city is looking to increase taxes. Okay, so I think we need a third option so people can react to it, so we can really get a sense of what is it that's really important to them. Because when I've asked a number of people, a lot of the reactions were sometimes were either general, you just need to cut spending, or we don't need the Coliseum, or we don't need the BCPA, or we don't need the golf courses. But I think Alderman Fazzini, did talk about what it would take to sell a golf course, and it's not that obvious. A lot of those solutions are not that obvious. So I really would want to understand what the impact would be, and I don't think we can do that within a month. It takes a while to shut down an operation, I think, or a program. And I'm really looking forward to more conversation on that. One other thing, and as you see the mayor trying to shut me down here, one other thing, oh no, he was sneezing, okay. One other thing that I would say is about pension funding. That's something that we heard very clearly during the campaign. There were a number of people who said that we needed to take care of our responsibility. So sometimes when you say you need to take care of our responsibility, well, the money has to come from somewhere, and we need to do something about that. I said on Saturday, I see it as a moral obligation. I don't like to go back on my word. If I have to do the tough thing to do it, I will do it. And that's where I will stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and I appreciate your comment. You're certainly welcome in my foxhole anytime. Matter of fact, if we continue, and this is serious, if we continue to follow the lead of our state and federal government with our spending issues, you likely may end up in my foxhole, sir. So you're welcome. Where do I start? Number one, I think Mr. Fazzini is probably right. We probably need a separate street and sewer fund for that bond issue, and I need more than a solemn promise that $4 million is going to end up in next year's budget on top of what we would normally spend, okay, before I would vote for it. Because I didn't vote for that bond with any intention of it covering operational expenses. That's just out on the edge there. Yes, sir, we are giving up a competitive advantage. As a matter of fact, we have some of the highest tax levies in the entire country. And that's why we're seeing folks leaving Illinois, and actually they're going to be leaving Bloomington. We have been very sheltered, okay, up through this recession, and I think we're starting to see a little wave of what might happen. One of our major employers and even our universities are starting to feel some of that. On a local level, I think we better pull out the emergency checklist and figure out what we're going to do here. And one of those things might be to raise a little tax. Okay, I understand that. But again, we can't spend our way out of trouble here. We're going to have to look at some major league cuts and how much is really important. Certainly, funding our pensions, funding our public safety has got to be paramount, okay, along with the basics in terms of water, solid waste, etc. All those things that really by law we have to provide, okay? But there's a number of things that we're providing, kind of Cadillac service, okay, that a lot of other communities don't actually pay for. There's a lot of ways that if we as citizens and as the community and we as leaders will step up and say, folks, you want to continue the BCPA, you want to continue the Coliseum, you want to continue these great programs that we've got, you're going to have to put some skin in the game too. And so we're going to have to ask for volunteer services. We're going to have to look at exactly what those folks absolutely have to have, not necessarily to expand, but to maintain some level of semblance of service, okay? And look at, number one, let's book, only venues that are going to make money, or that we believe will make money. Let's not book something that's going to, obviously lose money. We've got to have some responsibility in what we're doing here. Certainly, David, yes, you and I sat here and scratched on the back of the envelope, and I have to hand it to you. I think you did a great job with the numbers that we have, and that's what I was trying to get at with our city manager. Certainly, he has his finger on the pulse. We have what are in those books, and it's high level, it's big programs. I'm not sure we want to cut to the bone on every one of those programs, but certainly there's a place and a time for everything, and I believe that there's probably a certain percentage that we will have to cut, okay? I don't know, we counted up a little over $11 million. And if you just look at a small percentage of that, we could certainly come up with a couple million pretty easily, I would think.
Well, we're happy to have them if you'd share with us.
And we better look at, and we're going to have to talk about that.
Yep.
And I have my sleeves rolled up. I will.
Okay.
One of the things that I'm very, very concerned about is the negative impact on our business community, as well as the folks that are on the cutting edge of being able to continue to make citizenship mean something here in Bloomington. And I have a number of constituents that are right there, fixed incomes and others. I've got young couples with one breadwinner not really making, the income anymore, and maybe the wife is keeping things together, and they've lost the home, they're in an apartment, etc. I mean, we have a lot of folks that are in pain right now, and we got to be cognizant of that. I'm not in favor of motor fuel tax, and I've got some documentation I hope everybody reads. I'll email it to you. I'm gonna pass it around. So I want you to take a look at it. Having been in the petroleum business and worked for a company that was in a petroleum business, it is not a high revenue stream. And when you put that extra stressor on those companies, I'm not sure that they can maintain it. Again, you can hand some of these. I didn't copy enough for everybody. Okay. To me, the drop in sales revenue that we're seeing and that our finance director has forecast is an endemic of and it's a sign of the loss that we can see coming. Okay? And at some point, there's some level when you tax so much that you're losing your taxable base. Okay? And I don't know where that sweet point is. I don't know where the hard edge of the knife is. But, Mayor, at some point, we're going to have to accept that. Certainly, I want to spend some time and work this thing out.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Well, I think that's it. Thank you very much. And let's see. I think we'll have a motion to adjourn.
Yes, so moved.
Second. Second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Those opposed can stay. Thank you.